In 1975, Sony released the first video cassette recorder for home use, Betamax. A year later, JVC released a competing format called VHS. In the years that followed, side-by-side tests of both machines confirmed Betamax's technical advantage in playback quality. That advantage didn't matter. By the early 1980s, VHS controlled the overwhelming majority of the home video market, and Betamax was already fading. Sony didn't lose because Betamax was worse. It lost because of a decision made entirely away from the television screen. Betamax's original cassette held about an hour of recording time. VHS held 2. For someone trying to record a football match or a feature film without swapping tapes halfway through, that difference mattered more than picture quality. JVC made a second decision that mattered even more. Instead of keeping VHS to itself, JVC licensed the format to other manufacturers: Panasonic, Sharp, Hitachi, and others. Sony held on to Betamax, licensing it to fewer companies and later than JVC did. Every company that licensed VHS built its own machines and set its own prices, competing with each other. That competition pushed VHS players cheaper, faster, and onto more shelves than Betamax ever reached. Movie studios and video rental outlets noticed where the machines already were. They stocked more titles on VHS because more households already owned a VHS player. That made VHS the more useful format to buy, which sold more players, which pushed studios to release even more titles on VHS. By the time Sony responded, the loop had already closed. Sony kept manufacturing Betamax machines until 2002. It kept producing Betamax tapes until 2016, mostly for a small base of professional broadcasters who had never left the format. The lesson didn't stay in the electronics aisle. The same pattern repeated across different industries for the next 50 years. What happened to Betamax has a name in economics: the network effect. A product becomes more valuable to each new user simply because more people already use it, regardless of whether it is the best engineered version available. Sony controlled the entire Betamax ecosystem: the machines, the licensing, the pace of expansion. JVC deliberately gave up part of that control in exchange for a much larger and faster-growing network of hardware and content built by other companies. This same tension played out again in personal computers less than a decade later. Apple built the Macintosh as a closed system. Apple designed the hardware, wrote the operating system, and controlled how the two worked together. Many users and many reviewers considered the Macintosh interface more elegant than its earlier competitors. Microsoft took the opposite approach. Microsoft licensed its operating system, MS-DOS and later Windows, to any computer manufacturer willing to pay for it: IBM, Compaq, Dell, and dozens of others. Those companies competed on price and hardware, the same way JVC's licensees had competed decades earlier. By the mid-1990s, computers running Microsoft's operating system dominated the global market, while Macintosh remained a smaller, more profitable niche. Apple's system may have been more refined. Microsoft's system was everywhere. 20 years later, the smartphone industry replayed the same scenario, but on a far grander scale than Sony or Microsoft had ever operated at. Apple launched the iPhone in 2007, keeping the same approach it had used with the Macintosh: one company designing the hardware and the software together, making them available exclusively to buyers of Apple's own devices. Following Apple, Google released Android the next year and licensed it, free, to any phone manufacturer willing to use it. Samsung, HTC, Motorola, LG, and eventually dozens of other companies began releasing Android phones across every price segment, from budget devices to premium flagship models. Within a few years, Android phones surged ahead, and captured the majority of the global smartphone market. Apple kept a smaller share of devices, but the highest profit in the industry, because it never had to compete on price the way Android's manufacturers competed with each other. Neither strategy was wrong. They were answers to two different questions: who wants to own the largest network, and who wants to own the most valuable one? In 2006, Sony once again found itself pulled into a format war, competing against Toshiba's HD DVD to decide the next standard for high-definition home video. This time, Sony played the role JVC once played, not its own. From the start, Sony focused on building strategic alliances and partnerships with film studios, other electronics manufacturers, and its own PlayStation 3 game console, which used a Blu-ray drive to play games. Every PlayStation 3 sold was also a Blu-ray player already sitting in a customer's living room, whether or not that customer ever bought a single movie. By January 2008, Warner Brothers, one of the last major studios still supporting both formats, announced it would release its titles exclusively on Blu-ray. Within weeks, retailers began dropping HD DVD. Toshiba discontinued HD DVD entirely by February 2008. The company that lost a format war in 1975 by staying closed had learned 3 decades later how to win one by building the wider network instead. Mobile phone networks faced the same choice in the 1980s, at a scale that made the video format war look small. In the United States, carriers adopted competing, often proprietary digital standards, each one controlled and promoted by different companies fighting for the same customers. In Europe, a group of national telecom operators and manufacturers chose a different path. Starting in 1982, they began developing a single shared standard called GSM, designed from the start so that any equipment maker could build phones and network hardware to the same specification. GSM launched commercially in Finland in 1991. Any manufacturer willing to meet the standard could sell into it. Nokia, Ericsson, Siemens, and eventually dozens of others. Motorola had built its reputation, and much of its early cellular business, around the American market and its more fragmented competing standards. It didn't commit to GSM with the same early weight that Nokia and Ericsson did. As GSM spread from country to country, eventually reaching more than 100 nations, the manufacturers who had built for it from the beginning built with it. By 1998, Nokia had passed Motorola to become the world's largest phone manufacturer. The pattern held again. The open standard, shared by competitors willing to build on the same specification, outscaled the manufacturer still betting on its own version of the technology. Betamax lost to a shorter list of allies. Macintosh lost the market it had helped create to an operating system it never controlled. The iPhone kept the margin and gave up the majority. Blu-ray won because Sony finally built what JVC had built against it 30 years earlier. None of these outcomes were decided by which product performed better in a lab. They were decided by who built the wider network and who was willing to share control long enough to make that network unbeatable.